indicating that there are significant quantities of water at both lunar poles. It appears quite firmly that there's about twice as much water at the North Pole. I should say water ice. I want to be very careful here. We're talking about ice. About twice as much water ice in the North Polar regions as in the South Polar regions.
The first clue came 4 years ago, when another satellite spotted what seemed like ice at the bottom of a crater near the South Pole, dumped there millions of years ago by a comet. The sun never shines there, so it never evaporated. To confirm the discovery, last January, NASA launched this satellite, the Lunar Prospector. Since then, it's been orbiting the moon over the poles, scanning the surface, searching for more general signs of water. Tonight, NASA announced it had found it. 250,000 miles away, the moon is a fraction the size of the Earth, just over 2,000 miles across. When the Apollo astronauts went there in the 70s, they landed at 6 sites near the equator, where there was no sign of water. But the Lunar Prospector has found water at both North and South Poles. In fact, twice as much at the North Pole and the South. In total, enough water to fill a lake 35 feet deep, covering 4 square miles.
It's one small step for man.
It was in 1969 that men first landed on the moon. They found a dry and dusty surface, but there was concern they might unwittingly bring back moon bugs and contaminate the Earth. They were put in quarantine when they returned. So were the rocks they brought back, most of which are still languishing in airtight vaults. In fact, scientists found no hint of moon bugs and no water in the rocks. After 6 missions, the public got bored. The Apollo program was curtailed. No one's been back since. The discovery of water on the moon could change all that.
If the moon was to become a staging post for manned exploration of the solar system, then having water there makes it very much easier. The second one is that if there was a question of having a long-term lunar colony where you grow food, then having water available makes that a good deal easier.
If humans did colonize the moon, they could drink the water and make oxygen from it to breathe. They could even make hydrogen and oxygen rocket fuel from it. Launching rockets from the moon would, in theory, be a very good way of exploring space.
The moon has 1/6 the gravity of Earth, so it's easier to leave the gravitational pull of the moon, and of course there's no atmosphere either. So again, leaving the moon's surface is that much easier.
When NASA claimed it had found tiny fossils in a Martian meteorite, its reputation soared. More recent research questions that claim. Now NASA may be hoping their latest findings will once again galvanize enthusiasm for its space program. James Wilkinson, BBC News.
Serbian authorities said tonight that more than 20 people have died in fighting in the province of Kosovo today. Security forces launched a massive operation against what they describe as terrorists, ethnic Albanians opposed to Serb rule. The fighting took place in the Drenica region, northwest of the capital, Pristina. Our correspondent Paul Wood is the only television journalist to have reached the area, and he sent this report.
This is the secret conflict the Yugoslav authorities don't want the world to see. Special police units move into ethnic Albanian villages in the Drenica region of Kosovo. Local people spoke of a massive operation, with machine gun and mortar fire continuing all day.
6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning, we just saw about 2,000 or 200 soldiers or police. They were coming up.
The Serbs say this is a search for illegal weapons, but to the local Albanians, it's an attack on their homes and families. Ethnic Albanian refugees are fleeing across the hills. We heard many stories of families becoming separated, with women and children trapped in villages at the center of the security operation. The plea everywhere was for the international community to do something to stop this. Local men have taken to the hills, armed only with hunting rifles. But we did see supporters of the outlawed Kosovo Liberation Army with machine guns and anti-tank weapons, and were not allowed to film them. The Drenica region has been sealed off. The only way in and out is by farm track and unmetalled road. On the way, a bullet-riddled car. The ethnic Albanians say it was fired on by a Yugoslav Air Force plane. The Kosovo Liberation Army, which the Serbs say is a terrorist group, probably numbers only a few hundred active members. But here in the countryside, latent sympathy for the KLA is being converted into active support, bringing with it the danger that this conflict could spin out of control. Paul Wood, BBC News, Drenica, central Kosovo.
Here, the government's changed its advice on how much red meat we should eat. 6 months ago, the
anger's growing along with the number of jobless. Outside Frankfurt's unemployment centre, demonstrators demanded government action to stem the mounting crisis. There were 200 similar protests across the country today, as the record level of unemployment shows no sign of declining. One of Germany's almost 5 million unemployed is Martin Carlson. His 4 housemates are also on the dole. With both private companies and the public sector making redundancies, it's hard to find work.
Oh, I'm unemployed nearly 11 months. It's very difficult. They all have no money at the time, therefore there are no new jobs.
British companies who've set up in Germany complain that high taxes and strong unions discourage them from expanding their workforces. Butlers in Frankfurt make salads and sandwiches for delivery to offices. For every Deutschmark they pay an employee, they have to give another in tax to the government. As a result, staff here are twice as expensive as in Britain.
With a minimum wage of £7–8 an hour, which is very high, and of course that for me is very prohibitive.
The Chancellor, Gordon Brown, who's been speaking to bankers in Frankfurt, says Europe needs urgent reform if it's to create jobs. Britain will use its current presidency of the EU to press the case. Germany is one of the countries requiring a fresh start.
Europe's now got to embark upon a major programme of economic reform. Reform in employment policies, welfare policies, tax policies, so we can create more jobs.
But people here worry that the sort of changes which Britain has already gone through are too painful, producing more jobs, but less secure ones.
Easier hire and fire means that first it's easier to fire you, and then you may have the hope of being rehired again, but you may not. And that, of course, is very unpleasant.
But today's protesters fear that eventually such bitter medicine may have to be swallowed. Germany's jobless can see little reason for optimism. Even if the government takes action to tackle the problem, it could be years before the impact is felt in the economy. Jonathan Charles, BBC News, Frankfurt.
The cost of calling mobile phones from ordinary telephones is to be investigated by the Monopolies and Mergers Commission. The industry's regulator has complained that people are being ripped off, with prices among the highest in Europe. The telephone companies say they've already cut the cost of calls.
Rich and poor think mobiles are essential. Millions have been convinced by good prices for the phones themselves and a smooth sales pitch.
I suggest you go for the Nokia 1620 or the Motorola M760.
But the charges for those who phone them are high. When BT puts a call from an ordinary phone to a mobile, the mobile operators like Vodafone and Cellnet charge BT. The regulator says that charge is too high and BT adds too much on top to the caller. A rip-off, he called it.
As you pick up your BT phone and you call somebody with a mobile, that's costing you 32 pence a minute during the day. I think it should be 20p. The companies involved, Vodafone, Cellnet and BT, show no sign of reducing that price.
In the last 10 years, mobile phones have expanded massively. 44,000 a decade ago, rising steadily to around 9 million today. But the cost of phoning them has barely fallen. 40p a minute 10 years ago to 32p today, with the big fall a year ago when the regulator talked tougher to the companies.
So it's very expensive for my friends to call my mobile phone, particularly compared to international rates. It's cheaper for them to call America than to call me.
Mobile phones are one of those things that have just taken off and everyone's got them, and so they're making the most out of it at the moment.
That's for the Monopolies Commission to decide now. Cellnet said it welcomed the chance to put its case. BT denied ripping people off. Vodafone accused the regulator of pursuing a vendetta.
We believe that competition has been working very effectively in the consumer's interests, and we don't believe it's necessary for the regulator to intervene. But given that he has, we're very happy to take our case to the MMC.
Oftel says the real problem is that a small clutch of companies has too tight a grip on the market, and that's not likely to change. The regulator, it seems, will have work to do for many years to come. Stephen Evans, BBC News.